So I think when people talk about homelessness, they are thinking about a lot of the discussion centers on Main Street and the people we encounter on the sidewalks. That's often a very limited view, of course. So when Sarah and I started to think about this topic, we thought it would be important to have two kinds of speakers. Someone with very specific knowledge of Northampton and the issues that we encounter and confront in Northampton, but also someone who could offer us a kind of a larger context for thinking about homelessness. So we, I think we really I mean, we're excited to have a perfect team in terms of what we were thinking about. We begin with Pamela Schwartz for the big picture, followed by Alan Wolf with a more Northampton specific perspective. Pamela has served as the director of the Western Massachusetts Network to End Homelessness since 2013. In her early career, she was a legal services lawyer working on behalf of low-income tenants. She's also served as an analyst doing policy analysis and communications with a number of different groups, including the Tax Equity Alliance of Massachusetts and the National Priorities Project. And she's been involved in a lot of kind of organizing and mobilization around campaigns, including tax override campaigns, and chaired the write-in campaign for Joe Comerford's state Senate race. And for the years 2019 to 2013, she actually represented Ward 4 on City Council. Alan Wolf is the Chief of Staff to Mayor Norkowitz. In that role, his main focus has been on economic development and on delivery of city services. And from that position, he has been involved recently in the response to the pandemic and enabling our city's social service partners to serve our at-risk populations. Alan graduated from Northampton High School and earned a BA at UMass before heading south to get an MBA at William and Mary and working in Washington, national politics in Washington, DC, before he returned to Northampton in 2010, where he lives with his family in Ward 4. So Pamela and Alan will each talk for about 20 minutes. That will give us some time at the end for questions and discussion. And we'll start with Pamela.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. Hi, neighbors. Hi, fellow people from Northampton and beyond. It's so nice to see you here. And it's a treat to bring my work to my community. I mean, I guess my work is my community, but to my more immediate community. So thank you for having me. I'm going to spend a few minutes just sort of introducing you to the Western Mass Network to End Homelessness, because that is the vehicle for a sort of broader picture of the moment in time we're at around homelessness, both in our region and informed by federal and state policies that are happening right now. And then Alan's going to talk about Northampton, and then we're going to talk together. And I will say I come at this work fundamentally with the frame of an organizer, which is to say, what can we do? How can we take our caring and our desire to be informed and aware of what's happening in our community with people who are as vulnerable as those who are experiencing homelessness, and what can we do about it? And so I look forward to focusing our attention on that. But to start, let me orient you. It just so happens that tomorrow morning at 10, the network is having its annual event, its annual gathering. We gather together. Well, we used to do it in person. Now it's on Zoom. I don't know what next year will bring, but we gather together and we take stock of where we're at as a region. The Western Mass Network to End Homelessness covers the 4 Western counties: Hampden, Hampshire, Franklin, and Berkshire. I'll just give you the mission. It's to prevent and end homelessness with a housing first approach that centers racial equity. That's what we do. It is important as we go forward, and part of the sort of foundational work is understanding the words housing first. There's luckily a sort of intuitive response to it in its very words, but I do want to spell it out because it really does inform our work in ending homelessness. And what that means is that the best response to homelessness is housing with the appropriate and necessary support services. The reason why that's such an important, meaningful term is that it is actually a distinction from where we were as a policy 20, 30 years ago that actually partly gave rise to the sort of shelter response to homelessness, which is to say, there used to be a phrase out there of housing ready. Somebody experiences homelessness, they enter shelter, we're going to get all their ducks lined up. We're going to get whatever treatment they need, whatever GED they need, whatever job training they need, whatever they need. We're going to get it all worked out, and then we're going to move them to housing, and that's how they're going to have success. And data, lived experience, and collected in the form of data, demonstrated that actually housing as the very first response to homelessness is the most effective for lasting housing. And really, I bet if we all think about it in our own sort of intuitive ways, we go, yeah, that makes sense. The power of a home in healing, whatever there is to heal, the power of a home in moving forward in one's life, it's powerful, one's own 4 walls. I mean, I assume I'm making an assumption that we all have those 4 walls here on the screen, and if I'm making a wrong assumption, I apologize, but I'm just going to say that we know what it is to come home. And so to have a system that centers housing first is a system that has the best shot at ending homelessness. So that's what drives us. The good news is what drives the federal government policy and what drives the state policy. So it's no longer cutting edge, it is the norm. And Massachusetts has been actually on the front end of adopting housing first decade and a half ago or so. So every year, bringing us back down to our region for a minute, every year HUD requires communities that receive federal homelessness dollars, and we get a lot in our region. We get over $5 million across the 4 counties in federal homelessness dollars. To receive those dollars, you must do a point in time count, an annual point in time count, and it is with all the limitations that might suggest. It's one night, it's typically the last Wednesday in January all across the country. And sometimes you might catch headlines in New York Times, other periodicals that you read talking about homelessness up, homelessness down. That is relying on the HUD point in time count numbers, just to sort of give context to what you're reading. So we do that. Every community does that. And I'm going to show you our regional numbers. Now, this is my segue to screen sharing. Here we go. Okay, let me just blow this up. Hold on. I'm always a little bit clumsy when it comes to, I need to get to slide. Oh yeah, wait, hold on. Here we go. If I go here, and then I go slideshow, and then I go, well, I'm going to play from start, but I'm really not going to play from start. What you're seeing, welcome to my preview of tomorrow's big event. We've got, actually, it is sort of an energizing fact, I'll tell you, because we do have over 300 people registered across the 4 counties to learn, to come together. There are members of the network. Alan is part of it. This mayor is part of it. All mayors across the region, state legislators, and all these people who are working, all these organizations and individuals working to end homelessness. We all are coming together tomorrow. But here is, I just want to move this box out of the way. Okay. So here's a glimpse of homelessness in our region on January 27th. It's a lot of human beings. 2,673 across our region. 1,906 of them are members of families. I don't have the breakdown available on the number of children, although that is available, but it's to take it in, let's just pause for a minute. That's a lot of people without a home. And that's an undercount. That's a terrible undercount, actually, because HUD does not count people who are doubled up, as the expression goes, people who are staying at a relative's, a friend's, couch surfing, as the other expression goes. Lots of young adults are couch surfing. So this is an undercount, and it's a lot. So that's just like a thumbnail of our 4 counties. This is not going to come as a surprise to you that people of color are disproportionately impacted. And here's a chart to bring it really home. Okay, so it's a lot. I'll break it down for you. So you see the general population is 8% Black in the 4 counties in Western Massachusetts, and 20% of the population experiencing homelessness is Black. The general population in Western Mass is 17% Hispanic or Latino. 53% of people who are homeless are Latino. So it's there, right? I mean, it's 2.5 times to 3 times greater representation than their population. We know that structural racism underlies homelessness. That is why it is centered in our work and in all of our legislative policies that we are pushing. Another fact, this is a little bit in the weeds for our audience, but it's so tempting that I just have to, it's so cool. It's a positive that I want to share it with you. During COVID, the priority was public health. It's also an amazing and fascinating, not surprising, but still fascinating and provocative fact of what we did in the face of COVID-19. When we treated it as the public health emergency that it is, which it always is, but interestingly, with a pandemic that was threatening to everybody, where the spread of it was threatening to everybody, the political will existed to step up and make sure there were no people having to forcibly sleeping on the streets. So as a result of that and the need to social distance, additional space was opened up. And that additional space was taken in hotels, which of course were shut down. So it was an economic convergence and a public health convergence. What we see, hardly surprising, is that those that were on the drop in unsheltered population from 2020 to 2021 was precipitous because of this additional capacity. I know we hear sometimes, I will call it a red herring of what if people want to sleep outside? And I'm not speaking on behalf of any one individual, but I will say that is not a basis for policymaking. That is on the outer edges, and that we can define our policy on the assumption that given a proper place to sleep, a decent, safe place to sleep, and whatever else they may need to live a whole life in the most basic sense, people will choose to have shelter. That's our operating assumption in our policymaking. We also saw the impact of singular hotel rooms on rehousing. You see in the chart on the right, 37%, a rate of 37% in rehousing people out of hotels versus 13% out of congregate. Congregate's the fancy word for a site, a room. First Churches was a congregate. Friends of the Homeless in Springfield is the largest congregate in the region. We see that huge disparity in rehousing success, and it raises a lot of questions about the power of 4 walls, even when it's not your home, about the access to case management and support services. There's a housing first element in this success. So we are using this, FYI, in our policymaking with our state agencies. Here is what I really need to bring home to you, because this segues to what we can do now, that we're going to get to. We have an eviction crisis happening right now. It was happening pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, although there was a pause in that eviction crisis when there was an absolute eviction moratorium that our legislature passed, the most comprehensive in the nation, we can be proud to know. In October 2020, that stopped evictions. But then when that was, it was passed in the spring. It was lifted in October of 2020. And when that happened, we see 16,000 new eviction cases having been filed, 3,000 executions for possession. That's the last step before you hand it to the sheriff and they go give you 48 hours notice and they put your stuff on the sidewalk. So These are happening. These filings and these possessions are being granted. What is also true, and see in Western Mass, you can see the Western Mass number. We're not exempt, of course. We have over 2,100 eviction filings. We have 137 executions for possession. Now, we also have foreclosures that are not exempt either. Homeowners are facing the threat as well. Especially once the eviction moratorium lifted, because the eviction moratorium provided some protection for homeowners. What is happening now, what happened in December, is that the legislature passed some protections, not as much as we wanted or the people need, but they did pass an important protection that paused an eviction case when a rental assistance application was pending. When Governor Baker precipitously decided to lift the state of emergency on June 15th, he did it without consulting state agencies. He did it without consulting his state legislature. There is a mad dash amidst a lot of feeling around what he has done and the peril he is putting thousands of tenants in because of, sorry, was that a question? No, maybe an unmute for a second. What happens right now, the CDC moratorium that is effective till June 30th pauses executions if they're for non-payment of rent due to COVID. The laws that were passed by the legislature in December of 2020 pauses evictions if a rental assistance application is pending. All these big numbers you're seeing out here, these people underneath those numbers, they become at serious risk when the state of emergency lifts if the legislature doesn't do something right away. I mean, right away, which is what's going to lead us to what you can do. Okay, so here's the what you can do part. I just said it. I'm going to keep moving. Oh, that okay. They said you guess a few more racial equity statistics are the chair of the Representative Bud Williams from Springfield, the chair of the Joint Committee on Racial Equity and Civil Rights and Inclusion, will be talking tomorrow. He's going to bring up raise these facts. The poverty data is as glaring as anything else. You see that gap. You see a poverty rate of 38% among Hispanic, 23% among Black, 19% among Asian, and 14% among white. We have structural racism underlying poverty, underlying homelessness. And there's yet one more factoid. You can see where our event is all about. It's really about pushing action. So that's yet another, you can see 60% of tenants who are behind on rent are people of color. When these protections lift, who's going to be impacted disproportionately? People of color. Okay, moving on along. Somebody time me as we go. I'll spend 1 second on this slide, but it's a very important one, but might want to listen to my words over seeing the graph. Depends how graph friendly you are. I kind of shirk when I see bars, but maybe you're good with them. Bottom line is we have a massive housing gap, massive. Now, I'm not even talking affordable housing. I mean, we know there's 1 in 4 extremely low income people have no chance of finding an affordable housing unit. Here, I mean, that's a national and statewide and regional statistic with only slight variation. Here, there's no housing in Western Massachusetts. I mean, it's a serious shortage. And you can see the growing gap. We're down to, minus 13. We're basically a total of 25,000 by 2025 is the projected housing gap. So we have a big problem that's going to require big solutions that would take the political will to get there. Enter the federal government. Oh my gosh, we've got good news. We've got good news. We have something to work with. We have President Biden who stepped up and the Congress who stepped up and passed the American Rescue Plan Act, which is giving us resources, on the ground resources, new emergency housing vouchers. You might have heard of Section 8, that this is along those lines, but more well-tailored to serve homeless people and people suffering from domestic violence, and more flexible with more support funds. I mean, they're smart policy. We've got a whole bunch of money coming to Massachusetts, over $700 million in rental assistance funds. We have $126 million coming in home funds, directed to homelessness, that is intended to help support the conversion of buildings and sites to permanent supportive housing for people who need supports. We have homeowner assistance fund for mortgage delinquencies. It's an opportunity. So that's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So there's resources, there's money. Now we need to build the capacity to create housing. We need to build the housing. And so one of the things we're pushing is an act relative to housing production. It's basically setting affordable housing goals, requiring multifamily zoning. We've got a great city that's ahead of the game on this. More to do, always more to do, but yay, Northampton. And we just have to get statewide progress on our zoning reform, so we can really have a built by right zoning situation to create more housing. And we also have an opportunity in the American Jobs Plan with the $213 billion proposed by the Biden administration. We have opportunity. It's a choice what we do with it. Okay, I am going to flag this. It's in the good news bucket. The state, where we're at right now in the state budget, which also circles back to your involvement. The Senate just passed its budget. The state Senate just passed its budget. The House did a couple weeks ago. In it, they included $1 million more for a program called Safe Havens, which is a fantastic, proven, successful program. It helps give that support I was talking about that people need if they are been living unsheltered and have multiple barriers and challenges. This is 24/7 intensive support. We just got, it sounds small, but it's big, 7 new beds in Franklin and Hampshire County. It's big. It's a drop in the bucket and a big drop in the bucket. And it's a win for our region. Big shout out to Senator Comerford, Representative Sabadosa. She pushed it. Representative Sabadosa pushed it in the House. Senator Comerford was able to push it and get her colleagues and the Senate Ways and Means chair on board. And we got additional money in the budget for our region for these beds. Big deal. It's a very big deal. Okay, so here, I'm just going to flag really quickly, just to give you a broad brush of the policy change we need to have to make the system change that we need to really end homelessness. COVID-19 housing equity, it's basically along the lines of stopping evictions during COVID-19 and the aftermath of COVID-19, and making ensure that landlords cooperate and accept rental assistance when it's available, so that they just can't choose to throw a tenant out if they're done. It's just it doesn't work in this public health emergency. The other one to really flag is right to counsel and evictions. In terms of our justice system and the racial justice aspect, every one of these has racial justice implications, every one of them. But right now, the fact that really deserves our attention is that over 90% of tenants are unrepresented, while over 80% of landlords have attorneys. There can be no justice without imbalance. It's just not possible. Tenants are defaulting in 25% of the case. Default, it means judgment entered, they never even have a chance. Why? Because they don't get the notice, they don't see the notice, they're given bad advice, there's a language barrier, there's a technology deficiency. Right now, it's all on Zoom. Right now, you have to get into a Zoom room. This is a barrier. Tenants are defaulting, 25% of them. And of all cases where judgments are entered, 98% of them are entered for landlords, 98%. And just to show you what we're up against, the court form that has an agreement form that you check off, that you would fill out if you're negotiating an agreement with a mediator, or if you're lucky to have a mediator, if you have an attorney, whatever it is, or if you don't have an attorney and you're negotiating, it is pre-checked. The landlord box is pre-checked as the landlord gets judgment. That's our court system. So we have a lot to fix. Okay, eviction record sealing. Huge barrier. You can't believe it. Mass courts. It's a database. Any one of you, and if some of you may be landlords here, and if you are, all the power to you. If you're an awesome landlord, we need landlords. We need landlords. We need landlords who are good landlords, and we also need policies that help landlords be good landlords. Because right now, any landlord who's just anxious about renting to a tenant can click it, put in a name, and it will come up if an eviction case has been filed. Not a judgment against the person, not a bad behavior, criminal record, nothing. If a case has been filed against that tenant, it is there, and tenants are constantly denied for that reason. And guess who's disproportionately denied? People of color. It is a huge, huge racial justice issue, this eviction record sealing. Up until last year, if the landlord happened to name the kids of the family who are on the lease, those kids, the eviction record would follow the kids for life. That got fixed last year. We need to fix the whole thing. We need to seal these records, open only in the event for a good reason, and then sealed permanently after 3 years so that we give people a chance. Tenant Opportunity Purchase Act sounds like what it is. Give tenants who are living in the building the opportunity to purchase an affordable building, the opportunity to purchase it, first right of refusal, still market rent. It has to match a third party, but it is a way to retain affordable housing. Okay, really quickly, just have to flag Senator Comerford once again is on this local option transfer fee on sales of high-end homes. Let's build our affordable housing revenue off of people who are able to buy $1 million homes, just with a very small surtax. It's a progressive measure. I'm not going to go into cliff effect. If you have questions, we can talk later. Emergency assistance is the family shelter program, making it better, more accessible. Strengthening mass rental voucher program. That's our Section 8. Hugely important. Bill of Rights sounds like what it is. Let's make sure we have a law that codifies treating people with dignity who are experiencing homelessness. Really quickly, we're just breaking down the local eviction data to bring it home right here. In Hampshire, you see there have been 161 eviction filings. Hampden, unsurprisingly, if we look at the racial data, unsurprisingly, the racial and poverty data, Hampden County has got the highest evictions. And this is the final page, which we'll get to as we wrap up in our discussion period. And I'm going to put in the chat after Alan talks, or maybe during, just in case anyone has to leave early. I'm going to put in some links where you can actually take action right now. Right now. This is where I'm going to close. Right now, legislators are debating what extensions to pass as the state of emergency comes to an end on June 15th. Right now, Homes for All Massachusetts Coalition, great coalition. It's the umbrella for what it sounds like the organizing arm of ending homelessness. Springfield No One Leaves is the local arm of that statewide arm. It's based in Springfield. Rose Webster Smith is the lead organizer. She's amazing. They are leading this campaign. I'm going to give you a link where all it takes is to click on that link and take 2 minutes, and you can send an email to all the legislative leaders and your legislators and say, you need to pass these protections now. We've got our legislators, they're on board, but guess what? They still need to hear from us because it puts fire in their belly and it empowers them. They want to be not yelled at, but they want to hear your yell. They want to hear your yell so they can go to the leader, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, and say, we got to do this. My constituents are demanding this. So it matters. Okay. That's discussion. Look at that. There. I have no idea how long I took. Oops, too long. That's it. Thank you. Go, Alan. Bring it home.
So that was terrific, Pamela. Thank you so much. I appreciate the setup and I hope I follow well here. You know, the truth is I really have one slide that I crammed everything on for a presentation that I gave to the Chamber of Commerce. I guess I could show that, or I don't know if you all have it and want to put it up. There were like 4 slides in what I sent you, Sarah, but really it's just the one. And that slide, essentially, do I have power to share that? I can if you want. Or I can just talk too, because I know everything on it.
You can share, Alan. So
okay, great. So let's see. Let me make sure I'm getting the right one here. Oh, hang on one sec. Sorry. Just going to make sure it's in presentation mode here. I apologize for not having that already. Okay, now I should be able to do this.
I filled in the pause, Alan, because I just put in the action steps in the chat.
Oh, great. FYI. Okay, so this is almost my career working on things with Northampton's at-risk population since I became the mayor's chief of staff in November of 2019. So really, I think Pamela really pointed to a lot of sort of tough realities about the approach of municipalities to the houseless population prior to COVID. You know, honestly, I came on board and we had a protocol for what to do about campsites, you know, that was pretty much tell them we were about to clean them up. And without a lot of direction on where to tell them to go. It was a very uncomfortable conversation, and I hope never will be again, but could, where basically at some point, someone would complain about a certain degree of mess in a given area. And then I would go post it and say, on Tuesday, we're sending a crew to clean this place up. Anything left here will disappear. And then folks would go find another spot. And that would sort of continue and repeat in the same spots in a circular motion until COVID hit. And then COVID hit, and Pamela is 100% right. Everyone suddenly became very concerned that there was a population of human beings walking around that could potentially get other human beings sick. And boy, we better spend some time and effort and frankly, money, making sure these folks are safe and don't get sick. And boom, immediately, a major effort was undertaken to open a shelter first at Northampton High School. And the benefit for all was that that building was closed and it was available. So we set up a shelter with incredible coordination between the fire department, the health department, the DPW, the police, the mayor's office, central services, that set up a 55-bed congregate shelter in the gym of the high school, using the cafeteria below it to help people eat, and then the locker rooms for both a male and female toileting area. So it was basically an ideal spot for that very early time in the pandemic, when we did not know really how the virus spread, what was coming next in terms of shutdowns and everything. We very quickly stood up that, and I think our maximum census was about 55, and it sort of fluctuated, probably 48 to 55, I think was the max, maybe 56. And that existed, I think, until the end of May of that year. And then the census started to drop precipitously, as it is right now in the current shelter, as folks started to head off back to, I think some of the couch surfing became available again. But basically ServiceNet, who was the nonprofit partner, was able to ensure that all but a few folks who were walking out of there had somewhere to go, and then reduced their effort to keeping the sites at the Cot Shelter and at Grove Street open year round, which they usually do not do, and maintained that level. So what we have now seen, and now with yet another winter, is that the census that they are more or less planning for is in the low 30s in warm weather and in the 45 to 50 range in cold weather. So after the high school closed, we then had to set about making sure that a bunch of services were available that had not been available because of all the closures downtown and in the libraries. Places like Haymarket that have served the folks who exist on Main Street were all closed and not allowing people in. So we set up porta potties all over town. Including in campsites, which we were no longer moving. Basically, during this entire pandemic, all we have done is sent cleanup crews out to the various campsites in and around town to basically make sure that the sites are sanitary, and particularly for sharps, which has been a big issue. So we've sent cleanup crews to clean. We worked with MANA to open a warming center at the Episcopal Church on Elm Street. And they also distributed a whole bunch of water that DNA helped us get as a donation from Coca-Cola. Through the CARES Act, I don't know the total number, but I want to say in the $130,000 range, got to the various folks providing food assistance, support. I guess it's 130 here, but it's actually, I think it's gone up since then, because we have still been trying to spend every cent of that money. And this one's a very easy way to spend CARES money. To all of those organizations providing meals for folks in need. And let me make sure I'm not leaving anything off these. Yep, the health department got set up a 24-hour testing operation for anyone who needed it or wanted it, either back when we were requiring that to get into the shelter, to get folks into the shelter as quickly as possible, but then we lifted that requirement and then actually had people in the shelter who were awaiting testing to join the general population. Bottom line, after both last spring, I think, and this past winter, thanks to many resources from many sources, anyone who wanted some kind of housing, in congregate housing, or to be pointed in the direction of Holyoke, where they had the hotel housing Pamela was talking about, anyone who wanted it got it. We were 100% successful for folks who were interested in the kinds of options that we could offer, I think is a fair way. So we were super grateful in the fall when we no longer had access to public buildings, that First Churches stepped forward, and ServiceNet and First Churches worked together to create, I think the max space was about 35, although they never hit it. And that was in large part thanks to some of Pamela's efforts to organize us all regionally, which was really one of the most beautiful moments in government that I have ever seen, where colleagues of mine in municipalities across Western Mass put their heads together with the service agencies working on this stuff, all led by Pamela, who kept us coming month or week after week together, and places who had just never stepped up in real ways did, and other places like Amherst, who have been terrific, were able to use their skills to expand. We expanded, Greenfield expanded, Holyoke joined, Pittsfield. It really was incredible. And so I think everybody's population stayed put because people want to stay in their own communities. And I think we saw that. And I think also to some extent, given Northampton did not have a hotel option and some of our nearby neighbors did, I think people for the first time maybe actually left Northampton that preferred the hotel, I'm in a room that I can close a door option, as opposed to a congregate setting. So our census at First Church is, I don't think ever got larger than 32, 33. It's down to like 12 or 14 now. And they are, it's going back to being a church at the end of June. And the cot shelter and Grove Street, it is believed, will be able to handle the population that is seeking shelter after that happens. And then in and around all of this, in trying to plan for the future, I'm sure you've all heard of the efforts to establish a community resilience hub. And this was, there was a need. There is the sort of resource center in the cot shelter in the old Elks building, but I'm trying to envision this on a much grander scale, serving a much larger segment of the population who requires assistance, from those that require the absolute most assistance to, honestly, a place hopefully downtown where anyone in the community could go and get a glass of water, or a mom could change a diaper, a community center that allows access to all of the resources, but where everyone feels comfortable being. And on the idea that the more community like it is, the more people will be comfortable accessing it. And so at the beginning of that process, and certainly COVID was yet another thing, because we had suddenly this realization that we had a need for an emergency space, we were able to merge two desires: the desires to serve our at-risk populations, again, in the broadest sense of what that means. Everyone who wants, everything from first-time homebuyer assistance to true assistance for folks looking for shelter, but also maybe provide a safe place that it is resilient, meaning the power won't go out in an emergency, like maybe next time it's a hurricane or another ice storm with climate change. Had we had this in the October storm of, 2012, people may have been able to use this, but also honestly a place instead of First Churches if necessary, although we have grander hopes than that. So the first thing we did was went out and looked for a partner, and Claire Higgins and Community Action Pioneer Valley stepped forward and said, we'll do it, which has been terrific. And they have already hired someone who is starting to project manage this. And then we spent a lot of time and effort looking at the perfect building with very tight criteria, and that being not directly on Main Street because we didn't want to take space away from Main Street commerce, but we wanted it right adjacent to Main Street so that it was something everyone could easily access from there. And very quickly, the Roundhouse became the favored location for this. And it's just got pretty much it all, literally a walk away from Pulaski Park. It's got plenty of space to put multiple organizations in. If Mana has their way, there'll be a big commercial kitchen in there. The potential to design the round part of the building to be able to house people in an emergency. And we'll see, right now we are literally measuring the air because the building started out as a convert coal to gas for gas lamps in the city. Industrial building, and it had been rated for A-OK for daytime office use, but having people sleep there potentially for a winter is a very different use than someone coming in and out to go to work for 8 hours a day. So we're honestly looking at all of that very carefully to make sure that that either this is not a problem or it's the kind of problem that we can imagine paying to fix, or community action when they take over could fundraise to pay to fix. But the goal is the Mayor Narkowitz would like to have this sewn up and ready to go, if not ready to house all of these things, but handed to community action to take over and start building out the hopes and dreams of all of our social services community before he leaves office on January 2nd of 2022. So this is certainly one of the most exciting things that he has worked on and would like to finish. So then the next piece of that, and Pamela highlighted ARPA, the money from Biden, as a very exciting, Pamela's pots of money are maybe some of that could be used for some of this. I'm really excited to try and figure that out. But also you may have heard that Northampton gets directly from the Department of the Treasury, $16 million as part of ARPA, the American Recovery Plan Act. I should say it one more time, I guess. And I personally applied for that money last Friday. I'm hoping the first half of it arrives tomorrow. So we will be watching our bank account for $8 million. And then the other interesting thing is that we get an additional tranche of money, and I'm not 100% sure that this figure is right, but this has been kicked around because there is no longer a Hampshire County government and we are the Hampshire County seat. There is a certain allotment for counties, and Northampton gets that money, and it may be an additional few $1 million that we will get. So fair amount of cash coming in. There's 4 buckets that money can be spent on. One is things related to social services and economic recovery, which is the bucket clearly that this group is most interested in. And then there is projects related to water, sewer, stormwater, and municipal broadband. Money for overtime for employees, and money for revenue replacement for things, monies that we lost on things like hotel tax, meals tax, things like that during the pandemic. I do not expect, I am not the mayor, so this is 100% Alan Wolf opinion. I do not expect, now that the pandemic at least has been declared mostly over by our governor, that there will be much overtime money needed so that bucket I don't think is going to be a big draw on the money. I don't think we are likely to do much revenue replacement because thanks to 10 years of Mayor Narkowitz's fiscal stability plan being so successful, the city weathered that fairly solidly. So that leaves maybe some big infrastructure projects that could save the city from having something giant break, and social service projects and economic recovery projects as likely to be the 3 things we spend most of that money on. And so that conversation begins soon. You all, I'm sure, will weigh in on the listserv that I read very diligently. And that is a conversation that will be happening in very very shortly, and we are working on the structure for that, but it will definitely go out to the people of Northampton to have input. I think that is everything. So in there could be, there are some ideas about perhaps building. The Mass Housing Shelter Alliance has an idea for a modular shelter that I'm going to be attending a webinar next week, that they're basically, for a quick $1.8 million, here's 25 single occupancy SROs, they call them. And maybe we'd find a spot and build one of those. Maybe we expand Grove Street. They have some land behind there which may be too wet, but I don't know. Maybe we give them some more capacity for shelter so that we're not looking around. So these are the kinds of things that are being kicked around. We know that we have no place, with First Church's closing, to expand the capacity starting, say, November 15th for another 10 to 15 folks that we are expecting will be needing shelter this winter. So it would, whether or not we can get something built by then, I don't know, but we need to make sure we have that capacity. And then we need to really plan on either buying or building something that, whatever the level, and this is a conversation we will undoubtedly be having with Pamela, whatever the level of effort that we decide as a community we are going to serve and needs to be served here, hopefully in continued wonderful concert with all of our neighbors doing the same, we want to make sure that capacity is online as soon as possible. And we have a mayoral election. So depending on who wins that, I will respond to their wishes and desires, hopefully. Did I leave anything out, Pamela?
That's great. No, I learned a lot. Thank you.
All right.
Learned a lot. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess this is our Q&A time at 5:50, huh? Discussion.
Right. So do you want people to put in the chat, or do you want people to raise their hands?
Oh, we can, aren't we? I think we're cozy enough to just go for it. Hi, Claire, I see your hands up.
Yeah, this is just a question. Two great presentations, and this was incredibly informative. There's one population that I'm used to having be precarious in terms of housing, and that's students. And I didn't see any mention of the students in the area and whether we have any count of how many of them are unhoused.
Well, I'll go first. I don't know if you have anything in particular to Northampton, but what I can tell you is it all went by so fast, but there was a number up there on what young adults, which are 18 to 24.
Yeah, right.
And in the point in time count, it was counted at 67. That's a gross undercount. I mean, that's understood to be a terrible undercount, because young adults are most likely to be couch surfing and, just bunking up at a friend's house and actually not have a home. So the student homelessness is very real and a big issue of concern. The good news is that there's been a tremendous investment in the last couple of years, thanks to federal money, and the state has done a good job too on young adult homelessness. So this region alone, the 4 counties are getting a total of roughly $3.8 million to address young adult homelessness, youth and young adult homelessness. And there are new partnerships happening between colleges and local housing authorities, where there are reserving some vouchers for students who are experiencing homelessness. And they are able to get housed while they're in school. That's like Westfield State University has got a program like that, a partnership with HCC. These are all, again, like meaningful drops in the bucket, meaning it's not enough. There's 5 vouchers right now that are out there. And there's also an initiative called Foster, Independence into You, FIY, Foster to Independence Project. And that is young adults who are aging out of foster care, which is a really, really high risk population for homelessness, because they don't want to have services anymore, although there are transitional services, but they don't want them for developmental reasons, we could all imagine. So they may reject them, and then they are even at more risk of homelessness. Well, so there are these vouchers that are targeted to that population, meaning subsidized housing and support. And that's also a partnership with a couple of housing authorities, and that's also growing. So the good news is that infrastructure is continually being built to address the needs of this particular population. That's how I can answer that.
Great. Okay. Anyone else? Any hands?
So I saw a question earlier about the folks on Main Street and panhandling, and I assume that question is asking, do they overlap with the homeless community? And not perfectly is the answer. They're sort of different populations of folks that are down and in and around downtown. They certainly know each other, and it's a community, but it's not as though we see all the people who you might think of as regulars, as people who panhandle, coming in and out of First Churches. They are not the same populations.
Really interesting.
Agreed with that analysis across the board. Street panhandling does not necessarily suggest homelessness. It suggests other things, obviously. Minimum, it suggests poverty and challenges, but not necessarily homelessness.
So I have a question, Sarah. So how does this connect to or overlap with the discussion about affordable housing and all the struggles that are going on about whether we are going to have more density or aren't going to have more density?
I mean, I'll do a broad answer, and then Alan, you do this local answer. But I mean, that's a great question. I mean, the NIMBY, the not in my backyard stuff, is at the heart of our affordable housing crisis. And I'm all for affordable housing, but this would change the character of the neighborhood, quote unquote. It's at the heart of the affordable housing crisis. So there is an accountability moment that we need to address. And it's even tricky when we hear, but those aren't even affordable housing units that are going in. That multi-unit plex isn't affordable. So I'm opposing it because it's going to crowd my neighborhood and change the nature of the neighborhood. And it's not even affordable. And even that, I would suggest we pause at. And I'm not a defender. I'm not an advocate for luxury housing. Let me be clear. But I feel like each instance needs to be examined in context. And there's some debate. There's debate out there around the theory of more housing for all equals more housing for lower income. You know, there's a trickle down thing here, which we know has been debunked by and large. We really do need explicitly affordable housing. But at the same time, we should pause mightily when there is a multi-unit housing going in our neighborhoods. And our first reaction is, well, no, that doesn't fit. And that doesn't follow the criteria. I think it's a very important moment for us to look at closely. That's my comment. Alan, what's yours?
So mine is that, and I am not the zoning expert that say Wayne Fiden or Carolyn Mish are, but I can tell you that the city has deliberately worked to craft zoning rules that make this easier. And we are starting, honestly, to see the result of those rules played out as people start to try to do it. And I will let Pamela's characterizations of some of that stand and not say the same, but I mean, I think the intent of a lot of zoning reform that has happened and form-based code that's happening downtown is to make this stuff easier to do. You know, Live 155 in the Lumberyard were great downtown, but we also need to see these things pop up in every ward and neighborhood in the city. You know, and certain wards and neighborhoods have carried a lot of the load. You know, the next is going up on Village Hill as part of the original plan for that, and that's great. But the Bay State stuff that has been so controversial, is not, is more in the latter part of the description that Pamela, you were just saying. That's just adding housing stock. And we know that I mean, even Charlie Baker has said the number one crisis in Massachusetts is a housing crisis. And certainly that puts pressure on property values, which puts pressure on our seniors, which potentially puts them at risk for houselessness. And, I mean, just going back to the override conversation that we had, some of the stories we heard of people who were truly afraid of that override passing were in large part because of the housing crisis, because the values of property in Northampton is growing so fast. And now with COVID and so many folks, thankfully, joining us from other parts of the world, welcome one and all, that there is the demand for housing in Northampton continues to increase, which will only drive prices upward. So all I can say is that the intent with all of these zoning laws was to make it easier to develop more dense housing close in. The idea being have most of your city within walking distance of town. And the arguments you've read about are the natural result of people actually trying to do it.
Right.
I have a question. I don't know. And I guess initially, at least to Alan. Oh, wait, am I unmuted?
Good.
Yes,
You
you
can-
are.
Okay. So, Alan, as I understood it, a lot of your discussion focused on the expansion of congregate housing in the city. And Pamela indicated that there was going to be money from the federal government for the construction of affordable housing. So I wonder, does the city have plans to take advantage of that funding?
So I hope so. Yes, is the short answer. I mean, I think we're pretty convinced that single room occupancy housing is probably one of the most effective ways to address this. There's some really cool ideas on the table that I probably shouldn't share yet, but we are thinking pretty creatively about how to get this money. And Pamela, you're going to help, hopefully, and how to get as much of this money as we can and start building something as soon as we can, somewhere cool. And so when everyone goes crazy and says, no, not here, I hope everyone on this call says, yeah, here, why not?
Yep, good, good.
Alan, you got me totally intrigued. I can't wait to
I'll
talk.
tell you all about it, Pamela.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, because one of the big challenges is having the development capacity to use these funds. So, we've got a great developer in Valley CDC. We have a good developer in Wayfinders. There's not they're pretty maxed out, and so this is the tension. So money is half the equation. Capacity to use the money is the other half. So Alan, you've given me hope. Thank you.
So we have a spot that we're drawing up a could it be here kind of thing that will surprise you.
Oh, thank you.
I have no idea if that'll happen.
I know, just the idea that there's percolations. That's an awesome note to end on, frankly.
So just can I follow up on that? I mean, I think the SROs are great, but certainly the statistics that Pamela presented suggest that there are lots of families that need housing.
Yeah, and Northampton, obviously we had a congregate shelter because Northampton doesn't have a lot of hotel space. And one hotel we were talking with, we were desperately trying to get it for a while. It was a MEMA shelter. And they, like in the movies, when the FBI shows up to a crime scene and says, we're in charge here, the state kind of did that to us at this hotel and said, this is our hotel now. And they did let us put folks who were actually sick there. But the truth is we didn't have a lot of people experiencing houselessness that got COVID. That just didn't really happen in Northampton or in our shelters. I think one positive case in the high school, and it was someone who arrived on the last day, and that truly, so like we can't say zero because of that. But it was so then when after that Mima Hotel closed on Con Street, we tried to get it because we wanted to have all 3 populations there, and the state just was not ready to do that. And you know, because they had some motel type housing, which we thought was great, as well as internal, and we were hoping that the isolation and then the actual quarantine cases could be on the inside, and then we would have folks just needing shelter on the outside. No one was ready for that. So it didn't work in Northampton. Unfortunately, they got it up and running. They had a Q&I shelter in Pittsfield, and then Holyoke actually opened a bunch of hotel style shelters. And we sent some folks who were not, for whatever reason, not equipped for congregate settings. We were able to place in Holyoke, which was great. But I agree with you. We haven't got great options in the short term.
Unfortunately, I have to go. And I know this was scheduled for 5 to 6, yes?
Yes.
It
yes.
was, yes.
So I just answered, there was a comment in the chat that I did want to address,
Yeah.
that having accessible city services is not, does not suggest a seedy downtown. It suggests a responsive and well-organized downtown. Actually, I would suggest the contrary. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the folks who are currently sitting in Pulaski Park, and we certainly, depending on your point of view, it's been a rough year for Pulaski Park. You know, a place that was, a lot of people felt very safe. I can just tell you from comments I've heard in the mayor's office, much fewer people feel safe there now. And the hope right there, we could have folks walking out and interfacing with those people and saying, come on inside, get warm, get cool, depending on the time of the year. And here's some water, here's a meal. And boy, what is it that you need? Oh, identification here. This group is here today. Go sit down with them. And by the way, there's a locker. Oh, that was something. We also put lockers downtown for people to store their stuff, in the hopes to have folks who are panhandling, maybe have somewhere to store their big pile of stuff other than right next to themselves, because they're afraid someone will come along and steal it. So the ideal would be the lockers that are currently in the first floor of the parking garage would move into the roundhouse. And then it becomes a place where you access folks, and, you know, there's all kinds of counseling. Every kind of counseling we offer is there. And you get these folks into that, because that is the secret to changing their lives, hopefully.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we are over time, so probably we should end this. Yes.
I do need to go.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to go city council. So
Yeah.
thank you all so very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so
This is
much.
really, really, really wonderful,
Yeah.
just wonderful.
Thank you for
And I
having
am
us.
on the listserv, all y'all. So if you have a question, you can, I mean, I have to be super careful there because you guys go hard. But I will happily answer questions if I can there.
And likewise, and I put in the chat the link to the network blog if you wanted to be in the loop and be in the loop with the federal, state, local news. Please join us.
Right.
Okay. So
Thank
nice to see you all.
Okay, thank
Thank
you
you so
There.
much.
so very much. This is
You're
really
welcome.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.